She recognized him by his neck, not his face. The face of a man who has lost everything tends to erase itself, becomes a version of nobody, but the serpent tattoo coiling up from beneath his collar, dark and precise against his skin, that she remembered. After 7 years, she still remembered every line of it. His name was Kang Ji-won, 28 years old, and until 9 days ago, one of the most feared crime organization leaders in the city. A man with a mansion, a fleet of cars, an empire built on the kind of obedience that money and fear produce equally. Now he was sitting in an infirmary chair with an ivy drip in his arm, wearing a plain gray t-shirt, 3 days of stubble on his jaw, and no one in the waiting room. His name was not on any list when he arrived. He paid cash, he gave only his name. That was all he had left. His wife, Evelyn Cross, 22 years old, platinum blonde, beautiful the way expensive things are beautiful, had left the morning he told her the accounts were frozen. She had already packed 2 suitcases. Her friends were waiting in a red convertible outside the gate. She put on her sunglasses at the door and said, "I didn't get married to start over from nothing." Then she got in the car and drove away while he stood in the doorway of the mansion that would be listed for sale by the end of the week. In the 5 days that followed, the empire dissolved in administrative acts. The cars were collected, the staff were let go, the allies stopped answering, and Ji-won, the Ash, they had called him, because he had walked through fire before and come out clean, had moved into a 40-square-meter apartment with cardboard boxes on the floor and run a fever until his body gave out entirely. He had not expected anyone to come back, but Miriam Ruth was already standing 3 feet away with his patient file in her hand and a recognition in her eyes that had nothing to do with the news. What she knew about him had nothing to do with empires. It had to do with a burning building and a corridor full of smoke, and a man who came back through a door 3 times when he had no reason to. The last time to carry a nurse out of a building that everyone else had already left. But what she did next, and what Kang Ji-won would do with the very last thing he still owned. That is the story. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and click join to become a member and help our channel. The accounts had been blocked since Thursday. Ji-won knew before he opened the files, had known since the call on Wednesday night, since the silence that followed on every other line he tried after that. He stood at the desk in the mansion's office with the documents spread in front of him and the kind of stillness that comes when a man has already understood something and is simply waiting to say it out loud. He heard Evelyn's footsteps on the marble behind him. She appeared in the doorway in her ivory silk robe, platinum hair loose over her shoulders, phone in her hand, 22 years old and beautiful in the way of things that have never needed to be anything else. She looked at him then at the papers on the desk. "You're up early." "I lost everything," he said. She laughed. Not a cruel laugh, a reflexive one. The kind that comes when something sounds too large to be real. "What do you mean, everything?" He pushed the documents toward her. She didn't touch them. She looked at the top page, then at his face. The laughter stopped. "The accounts," he said. "The companies, the cars, the building at 4th Street, the warehouse. All of it goes to creditors. The mansion is listed for sale by the end of the month." Evelyn took a step back. It wasn't grief on her face. It wasn't fear. It was something closer to contamination. The expression of a person who has just realized the thing they are standing next to is no longer safe to touch. "You're saying I'm going to be poor." Ji-won looked at her. He had shared a bed with this woman for 2 years, shared his name, sat across from her at dinners where everyone around the table was afraid of him. She was the only one who wasn't, or had seemed not to be. He understood now that she hadn't been fearless. She had simply had no reason to be afraid of someone who was giving her everything she wanted. "There is no more luxury," he said. "That's what I'm saying." She stepped back again, as if he had become something contagious. Then there is no more marriage. She was already gone before the sentence finished landing. He heard her on the stairs, heard the closet, heard the quiet efficiency of someone who had known, on some level, that this day was coming and had been quietly organized for it. 2 suitcases, both designer. Both already packed, he would realize later. He followed her to the door. A red convertible was idling at the gate. Inside it were 3 of her friends. Dressed, maquillage, sunglasses, the sound of a song playing too loud for 8 in the morning. They saw Evelyn come out, and someone cheered. Evelyn put on her own sunglasses at the top of the steps. "You're leaving like this?" Ji-won said. She turned and looked at him for the last time. Not with anger, not with sadness. With the closed-off calm of someone who has made a decision and found it clean. "I didn't get married to start over from zero." She got in. The convertible pulled away through the open gate, out onto the empty street, and for a long moment the sound of their music was the only sound in the city. Then that was gone too. Ji-won did not close the front door for a long time. The next 5 days were not dramatic. That was the thing no one prepared him for, that the collapse of everything he had built did not announce itself in scenes. It arrived in small administrative acts. The cars were collected on Friday morning. 2 men with clipboards who did not look at him. The security staff came on Saturday and stood in the driveway while their supervisor explained, quietly and without hostility, that their contracts were terminated. Allies stopped returning calls in the order of how much they had needed him. The ones who had needed him most went first. He moved to an apartment on the north end of the borough, 42 square meters. Cardboard boxes on the floor he never unpacked. Curtains that didn't reach the window frame. He stopped eating properly on the 2nd day, told himself it was temporary. On the 3rd day he stopped leaving the apartment. On the 4th the fever began, low at first, something he dismissed, a body objecting to the shift in routine. On the 5th morning he woke up with the room tilting sideways when he sat up. A pressure in his chest that made him hold the wall to reach the bathroom, and a shaking in his hands he could not explain by cold. He had not been sick in 8 years. Not once, not a single day that he could remember losing to illness. His body had always been the one system he controlled completely. He called a cab. He arrived at the hospital with cash folded in his pocket. No appointment, no name on any list. The reception staff looked at his ID without expression. No one recognized him. No one stood up differently when he walked in. He sat in a chair in the internal medicine infirmary, with an IV line in his left arm, his plain dark t-shirt soft against the chair, the serpent tattoo visible along the left side of his neck above the collar. His face was paler than it should have been. His jaw had 3 days of growth on it. He looked at the floor and kept his eyes there. A nurse crossed the room carrying a file. She paused 3 feet from him. He felt the pause before he looked up. The particular quality of attention that is different from a clinical glance. She was looking at him the way people look when they are placing something. Then she said, "Kang Ji-won." He raised his eyes. She was standing very still, the file held at her side, her white uniform pressed, a silver watch on her wrist, her dark hair smooth in a bun at the nape of her neck, honey brown skin in the fluorescent ward light, a face he did not immediately know. But he knew that she knew him, and that it was not from the news. She pulled a chair from the wall and sat beside him without asking. That was the first thing, not the standard pull a stool over, not the lean and speak. She took the chair and set it squarely beside his, as if she intended to stay for a while. She checked his IV line, noted something in the file, then set the file on her lap and looked at him directly. "You don't remember me," she said, not a question. Ji-won studied her face. He was running a fever, and the room had that slightly unreal quality that high temperature produces. But his recall was intact. He knew every face that had ever mattered in his world. This one didn't fit any category he had. "Should I? 7 years ago," she said. Heavy rain. A community clinic. 2 blocks from Halloran Street. There was a fire. The memory came back in pieces, not in order, The way things come back from a night when adrenaline overrode everything else. The smoke, the sound of children. The door he broke with his shoulder because the handle was already too hot to touch. He had gone in to retrieve one of his men who had taken a wound in the confrontation that caused the fire. He found his man already outside, but he had seen a corridor filling with smoke and a woman on the floor. 2 children gripping her arms. An old man crouched beside her against the wall. He had gone back in twice before that. He went back in a 3rd time. He got the children out first, then the old man. On the last pass, the woman could barely walk. He had put her arm over his shoulder and carried her out through the last of the smoke. He set her down on the curb, gave her his jacket, said something. He didn't remember what. He heard sirens. He left before they arrived. "That was you," he said. Miriam nodded. "I kept your jacket for 2 years. A strange silence settled between them. He had forgotten it almost completely. Not because it hadn't mattered, but because he had no architecture for it. It didn't fit anything. He had not done it for the organization. He had not done it for money or leverage or reputation. He had done it because the corridor was on fire. And there were people in it. That was the whole calculation. "I never found out who you were," she said. "Not until about 3 years ago, when I saw your name in the news for something else. And by then it was..." She paused, chose her next words carefully. "It didn't seem like the right moment to look for you." Jiwon almost said something. He didn't. Miriam stood, hung the file back at the foot of the bed, and adjusted the drip rate with a practiced hand. "You're dehydrated. You have a bacterial infection, and you haven't eaten properly in 5 days. Your blood pressure is low. You're going to be here at least through the weekend." She looked at him without softness, without pity, the look of someone who has assessed a problem and is already working out how to solve it. "I'm going to get you a meal from the floor kitchen. You're going to eat it." He started to say he wasn't hungry. "I know," she said, and left. She came back with a tray. Soup, rice, a glass of juice. She set it on the tray table and adjusted the height without commentary. He ate, slowly, because the alternative was to let the fever win, and the fever had already taken enough from him this week. Miriam returned 3 times that afternoon. To check vitals, to update the chart. Once, simply to stand at the foot of the bed and ask him, without sentimentality, if his chest pain had reduced. He said yes. She noted it and left. She didn't ask him what had happened. Didn't ask about his wife, about the companies, about what was left. She asked about his temperature. About whether the pain was worse when he breathed in. About whether he had taken his medication on schedule. He wasn't used to being treated like someone who needed taking care of. He found it, against all logic, bearable. She was checking a medication schedule at the station on the 3rd day when the ward door opened. Evelyn Cross walked in. Jiwon, propped against the pillows, saw her before Miriam did. He went very still. She was in a pale linen dress, white heels, the same enormous sunglasses pushed up into her hair, the structured beige handbag on her arm. She had the expression of someone performing a visit. The eyes doing the soft work of concern, the jaw slightly set underneath it. She sat down beside him with a sigh that was doing a lot of work. "Jiwon," her voice was low and careful. "I've been worried about you." He looked at her without moving. About me, or about what's still in my name. The soft expression held for another half-second, then reorganized itself. She reached into her bag and produced a folded paper, a form, a signature line at the bottom. There was a secondary account, she explained. It hadn't been frozen with the others. There were also some property interests, not yet transferred. She'd spoken to someone who thought there might be a way to restructure, to protect certain assets if he was willing to. "Stop," he said. She stopped. "You left before I was out of the driveway." "Jiwon," I panicked. "I'm here now." She reached for his hand on the bed. He didn't move it away. He just looked at it. This woman's hand on his, with the expression of someone watching a performance they recognize. Miriam walked in from the medication station, crossed to the IV line, and began a routine check without speaking. Evelyn looked at her. One look, the kind that assigns a person to a category and closes the file. Would you mind giving us a moment alone? Miriam picked up the chart and made a note. Not while he's under my care. Evelyn's head turned slightly, the way someone turns when they've misheard something. I'm sorry. What did you say? He's currently receiving IV antibiotics, Miriam said, still writing. I'm responsible for his treatment outcomes while he's on this floor. I stay. Evelyn looked at Jiwon, then back at Miriam. Then she smiled. A social smile. The kind used to signal that someone is being tolerated. I don't think you understand what's happening here. I understand exactly here, Miriam said. And for the first time since Evelyn Cross had entered the room, the air changed. Evelyn took her time deciding what to do with the silence. Miriam had left in the room. Then she turned back to Jiwon, as if Miriam were a piece of furniture that had briefly made a noise. Babe, I came here because I want to help you. Softer now. The version of her voice she used at dinner parties, with people she needed. I know the last week has been. You left before I made it inside, he said. I was standing in the doorway. You were already at the gate. She exhaled slowly. I panicked. I told you. You had the bags packed. A pause. Brief. I always keep a bag ready. You know I travel. Jiwon looked at the ceiling, not up through. The way men look when they're deciding not to say the thing that would end the conversation permanently. Because the thing isn't worth the energy. Evelyn tried a different angle. She turned back to Miriam. Listen, I understand you have a job to do, but this is a private matter between a husband and wife. And whatever you think you're protecting him from, I'm not protecting him from anything, Miriam said. She had not put the chart down. Her voice was exactly the same as it had been for the last 3 days. Even, precise, slightly lower than necessary. The voice of someone who has learned that a room pays attention to people who don't raise theirs. I'm doing a scheduled check. You can conduct your visit when I'm finished. Evelyn put the handbag on the edge of the bed and stood up to her full height. He's my husband. He's my patient. He's a man with a past that involves things you clearly know nothing about. Evelyn said it lightly, a social correction. The kind delivered to people who have gotten above themselves. You have no idea who he is. Miriam wrote one more thing in the chart, then closed it and held it at her side. I know he arrived here alone, no name on any list, no one in the waiting room, cash out of pocket. I know he had a fever of 103, chest pain, and hadn't eaten properly in 5 days. I know his blood pressure was low enough. When he came in, that doctor, Arantes, wanted him monitored through the night. She looked at Evelyn directly, not unkindly, with the complete absence of flinching that comes from having spent years in rooms where people are frightened. That's what I know about him. What do you know? Evelyn's composure held. It was a practiced composure, the kind built over years of being beautiful in rooms full of powerful men, but something in it stiffened. You have no business putting yourself in the middle of this. Then stop making the middle of this his hospital bed. Jiwon shifted, tried to pull himself up. Not to leave, just to be vertical, because there was something unbearable about having this conversation lying down. He got one arm braced and started to rise. Don't get up, Miriam said, without looking at him. He stopped, stayed where he was. Evelyn saw that, and something changed in her expression. Not anger, something sharper. A recalibration. She looked at Jiwon with the particular attention of a person who has just noticed something that changes the geometry of a situation. Are you two? She didn't finish the sentence. Left the insinuation to do its own work. Jiwon looked at her. Say it, he said. Say the thing you're about to say. She didn't say it. Instead, she turned to Miriam and delivered the version she had decided would land harder. Women like you always find a way to appear when men like him are vulnerable. It's a very old strategy. She paused, smiled pleasantly. I hope you know what you're getting into. The ward was quiet except for the sound of a monitor down the hall. Miriam set the chart back on the hook at the foot of the bed. Then she faced Evelyn the way she faced everything, without performance, without rage, without the need to win by volume. He may have committed many mistakes in his life. Her voice was still even. I genuinely don't know. I wasn't there, but today he is sick. He came here alone, with cash, without calling anyone, without his name on a list, because there was no one to call. And while he is in this ward, no one will use his weakness to extract what is left of him. She paused one beat. That's not strategy, that's the job. Evelyn laughed, a short, dismissive sound. You're defending a mafia man. I'm defending a patient. Miriam moved past her to the door. Perhaps that's why you don't understand the difference. She opened the door, held it. Evelyn looked at Ji-won. The handbag was still on the edge of his bed. She picked it up. She had the form still in her hand. The one with the signature line. She folded it, tucked it back into the bag. Whatever she had come to extract was not coming out of this room today. She walked to the door without looking at Miriam and went out into the hallway. The door swung shut. Ji-won looked at the ceiling for a very long time. The silence in the room had a different quality now, not the silence of the last week. The silence of an empty apartment, empty contacts, empty morning. This silence was inhabited. Miriam was at the medication station, writing in a form. The monitor down the hall kept its rhythm. The light through the window was the ordinary light of an afternoon in a city that didn't know or care what had happened in this room. He thought about the last person who had looked at him the way Miriam had just looked at Evelyn Cross. He could not find the memory. It may not have existed. 7 years ago, he said. I pulled you out of the fire. She didn't turn around immediately, wrote the last line of her form. Then she looked at him over her shoulder, and today I pulled you out of a room where they were still trying to burn you. She turned back to her form. He looked at the ceiling. He was not going to cry. That was not the kind of man he had ever been. But something in his chest was shifting. Not the infection, not the fever, not the pressure that had brought him here. Something older. The particular weight of a man who has spent years surrounded by people and has just understood, with the precision of a diagnosis, that he has been profoundly alone. He sold the watch on a Tuesday. It was the last thing he owned that still had weight. A Patek Philippe, vintage steel case, bought at auction for a number he had not thought twice about at the time. The dealer in the jewelry district held it under the loupe for 2 minutes and named a price. Ji-won said yes without negotiating. He took the envelope. He paid his hospital bill at the front window on the ground floor. Cash. He folded the receipt and put it in his coat pocket. Then he went upstairs to the internal medicine floor and waited. Miriam was finishing a handover at the station when she saw him, standing near the waiting area in a simple dark suit, the serpent tattoo visible above his collar, the watch no longer on his wrist. She signed off the last form and walked over to him. You were discharged this morning, she said. I know. He looked at her. The clinic, the one that burned 7 years ago. What happened to it? She looked at him for a moment, reading the question. Then she said, rebuilt partially, maybe a year after the fire. Basic structure. Then the funding dried up. For 3 years, it's been an empty building with furniture in it, and not enough staff. The neighborhood still has almost no primary care coverage. People take buses to hospitals 40 minutes away for a 10-minute consultation. Mothers, waiting hours. Kids, too. Elderly patients miss follow-up because they can't travel. She crossed her arms. We've lost at least 3 people in the last 2 years who would have been fine with earlier intervention. One was a child, 7 years old. Ji-won looked at the floor, then back at her. What would it take to finish it? She studied him, taking stock of the question, the face it was coming from. Then she told him the shape of it. Equipment missing or broken, consultation rooms structurally finished but unfurnished, the exterior water issue, the supply room that had never been stocked. She had looked into it before and hit the same wall. No money, no interest, no names. Ji-won listened, asked 2 questions. She answered them. I'll need your help with the coordination, he said, if you're willing. As a nurse, she said immediately. As a professional, not as someone who owes you anything. You don't owe me anything, I just... He stopped, started again. I think there's a part of my life that still works. I'd like to find out what it looks like when it's the only part I'm running. It took 7 months. The building had worse problems than the surface suggested. The electrical wiring in 2 rooms needed replacing. The supply room had mold behind one wall. Jiwon managed it methodically, without announcing himself to anyone who didn't need to know. He hired contractors from the neighborhood. He bought equipment through a medical nonprofit Miriam connected him to. He stayed out of the decisions that required clinical knowledge. He did not put his name on anything. When a local paper asked who was funding the renovation, he said it was a private donation in memory of a child from the community. The child's name, Cora, 7 years old, lost to a preventable condition 2 years earlier, went on a small plaque at the entrance. No other name did. The clinic opened on a Thursday in spring. No ceremony, no speeches. The doors opened at 7 in the morning. The first patient, an elderly man waiting 3 weeks for a blood pressure check, was seen by 9. By noon, there were 11 consultations on the board. A mother with a newborn sat under the window. 2 children drew on paper in the corner where the chairs were new and the floor was clean. Miriam coordinated inside. 4 days of leave from the hospital to help establish the intake protocol. She moved through the space the way she moved through everything. Directing, reviewing, answering questions from the 2 nurses the clinic had hired. Her white uniform was crisp. Her silver watch caught the morning light. Jiwon stood near the back of the waiting area. Simple dark suit, the serpent on his neck, the same face, leaner, the softness gone, but the coldness was different now. Not the coldness of a man who controls, the stillness of a man who has nothing left to prove. Miriam crossed the room and stopped beside him. "You look different," she said. He thought about it. "I don't feel better exactly." "No, less empty," he said. "That might be all." She looked at him for a moment. Then she nodded once and walked back to the consultation room. Evelyn Cross saw the story on a Thursday morning, a neighborhood account, a small photo, a caption about a clinic reopening. Someone had tagged Jiwon's name in a comment. She stared at it for a long time. He wasn't in the photo, but she knew. There is a particular quality to the understanding that arrives after the decision is irreversible. It is not grief. It is a calculation running its final column and producing the exact number of what you have lost by being only the thing you were afraid of being without. She had left a man when he lost everything. Someone else had come back because she remembered who he was when he had nothing to gain. Across the city, in a small clinic on a block that had been without proper care for 7 years, a charge nurse with honey-brown skin and a silver watch on her wrist was telling an elderly man that his blood pressure was under control and that he could come back in 3 weeks without taking the bus. He thanked her. She said, "It's what I'm here for," and it was. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever given everything to someone? Your loyalty, your presence, your name, and only discovered what they were really there for when you had nothing left to give? And have you ever been found in your worst moment by someone you helped long ago without expecting anything in return? Someone who came back not because you were powerful, but because they remembered who you were when power meant nothing? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about gratitude, redemption, and dignity, leave a like. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.